Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video. This is going to be a bit of a discussion specifically about importing knives into Canada, but before we get to that, I've got to touch on what's going on in the UK. Sorry to get political on you, but I feel like this is important enough that we in the knife community need to be talking about it. And hopefully, if you are in the UK, you guys can find some resolution to this. It must be so frustrating, and I really do feel for you guys who are knife enthusiasts over there. So for those of you who don't know, London has a crime problem that is, quite a big problem recently. In fact, they've passed New York City in terms of their murder rate, and that's not good. And so they've decided that they're going to do something about it. And what they're going to do is ban knives. Okay. Now, the problem with that is they're dealing with a symptom rather than the problem. And that is so frustrating because when you do that, another symptom just simply crops up. Okay. It would be like you had operable cancer and they're like, well, although we could do surgery and remove the cancer, we've decided just to give you, Tylenol so that you don't feel the pain as much. Or we've decided, to give you medication to treat your headaches or whatever other, your bowel issues or whatever other side effects you're having from the cancer and not actually treat the cancer. And that's what's happening not only in England, but in other parts of the world where crime is a problem. They think, well, let's ban the weapon and that'll solve it. But the reality is that won't solve it because you haven't dealt with the problem itself. And in England, the problem is changing demographics. The problem is crime and gang violence and poverty. Okay, and that's true many other places as well. If you look at the US gun statistics and if you remove crime from the equation, crime. If you remove gangs, okay, if you remove gang violence from the numbers in the US, they don't have a gun problem at all. All right. And so the same is true in England, but instead of doing anything to deal with gangs and the worthless scumbags who commit these crimes, they're just going to try to deal with the symptom. Okay. By the way, we should point out that New York is safer than it's been in a long, long time, largely because of measures taken by Rudy Giuliani. And if London and other cities, Toronto right now needs to adopt similar practices to what New York City did, and that would solve the problem. Okay, there is a solution. It's just that no one wants to talk about it because you're going to be called racist and you're going to be called bigoted and this, that, and the other. It's going to target minorities and whatever else. And the reality is, if there's high crime in a particular neighborhood, the police need to be there arresting everyone suspicious in that neighborhood. And yes, they're going to be those arrests are going to reflect whatever ethnic group is in that neighborhood. Right? Sorry, it has nothing to do with their race. It has to do with where they live, okay? And the fact that that's a problem area for crime. And in fact, if you're a good person, if you're an innocent person who lives in that neighborhood, you should be happy to see something being done in your neighborhood about crime instead of putting blinders on and pretending that there's not a problem where you live. Okay, so that drives me absolutely insane, and that's the solution. But instead, the idiot London mayor is going to ban knives, and that is so, so frustrating. So hopefully some politicians get in place that have some sense and have some willingness to deal with the problem rather than the symptoms. That's my rant for the day, guys. Thank you for putting up with that. And I'd love to hear your comments about it down below in the comments. Now, yeah, I know I said comments twice. Now, let's move on to the actual thing that I want to discuss today, which is importing knives into Canada. For those of you who are Canadian, we've all had some concerns about ordering knives from the States and having them confiscated. And some have gone so far as to say that, every knife you try to bring in is going to be stopped. And, there's just no point in ordering knives from the States. And it's a huge problem. Well, I'm going to suggest that that's not exactly true. In fact, I've ordered a number of knives from the States recently and they've come across the border without too much difficulty. For some reason, this knife completely throws off the light balance on my camera. I don't know why. It's really frustrating. It's just the reflection off the blade. Anyway, so I'm going to close it and carry on with our discussion here. So what I did in light of the changes that have been made is I sent an email. Actually, first I called CBSA. They said that's Canadian Border Services. I called them. I was given an email address for the department that's responsible for testing. So that is when you've imported a knife and that knife is deemed to be sort of questionable, they're going to send it to another department to be tested to figure out whether or not it's admissible. All right. And so that department that does the testing portion That's who I emailed. All right, so I'm going to share that email with you. I asked them a number of questions, and I phrased it like this to give you a little bit of background. Essentially, I said, look, I'm a knife enthusiast. I want to be able to order knives from the US and have a reasonably good degree of confidence that they're not going to be stopped. So can you explain to me, can you help me know what knives are likely to be stopped and what knives are going to come through without much of an issue? Hold on, let me take a drink of my coffee. And so I asked a number of questions about, mechanism, about lock type, about, I mentioned what knives are specifically illegal, such as balisongs and gravity knives and autos. And then I said, but the problem comes in that gray area of flippers where they don't fall into any of these other categories, okay? But they can, okay, you can push on the flipper tab and get it to open. And I got an interesting answer, so I'm going to share that with you, and as well as another customs document that I have heard rumors about, but had yet to see, despite my trying quite a bit to get a look at this. The gentleman who helped me in this case was very good to send me an additional document that we've all heard of and we all kind of know about, but as yet was not widely publicized. So here is a printed copy. Hello, Mr. Cleary. Here is the email. I've highlighted the points that I want to talk about with you. And of course, you can just pause this and read what he's written here. So he starts off by saying that importing folding knives, where does he start? Oh yeah. Importing folding knives is a bit complex. That's his very first statement here at the top. And that's a problem to begin with, okay? Laws shouldn't be so complex that the average person can't figure it out because we're the ones who are supposed to abide by these laws. And I know that's true in a number of different areas. And I think that's a general failing of government. And it's often, that convoluted legalese is often used to manipulate the situation. And I think that's part of what's going on here. And in fact, that's the basis for the constitutional challenge to these laws. And if you haven't, I've got a video coming up about the GoFundMe campaign to fund a legal action that would hopefully bring some resolution to this. If you're not aware of that, I'll post a link to the video in the description box below, but I'm going to do a follow-up. I'm going to have a giveaway associated with that effort. So that'll be coming hopefully next week, if not early the week after. Okay, now let me get back into what we want to talk about here, and that is this email. So I said, what if a knife has thumb studs, if it has a spider hole, if it has some opening mechanism that you can use to sort of flick the knife out? And these are his exact words, okay? Basically, a thumb stud or a hole in the blade is admissible even if it is spring assisted, okay? Even if it's spring assisted, unless the knife opens automatically with a flick of the wrist using centrifugal force. Now, I want to be very clear, this whole conversation happened long after the notification 18-01 that we have talked about quite a bit on this channel. So 18-01 is the one that says, if you can partially open the knife and then flick it open with your wrist, okay, which is going to be true of almost every knife. And I think what's happened is they've kind of realized that that's the case. And so, this guy is the one doing the testing. And by his own words, he's not kind of following that, okay? Because what knife can't you, if you wrist flick, get it to move? Now, I will say this. I think this provision here is more about empowering CBSA, okay? So what that means is they want to make sure that when they decide a knife can't come into the country, you have no recourse. And that's not fair and that's not right, and something absolutely has to be done about it. But from talking to this individual whose name I have left out, by talking to him, it seems like they're not exactly applying that evenly across the board. Okay, so, but very clearly, he says a thumb stud or a hole in the blade is admissible even if it's spring assisted. Okay, so that means like SOG Aegises, a number of Benchmades that are assisted, even some Kershaws that don't have a flipper tab are going to be fine. Now, I'll get to the PDF that he refers to here in a second, but then he says this: a knife with a flipper with an assisted opening device will be classified as prohibited from importation. Consult the PDF file. Now, this PDF file is old. It's been circulating for a while. I'm going to show it to you right now. If you've been into knives for any length of time, you have probably seen this. I've seen it on Instagram. I've shared it on Facebook myself. But when I tried to get this exact document from CBSA, they disavowed that they knew about it. I actually took a photo of this off of Facebook. I emailed it to CBSA and I said, hey, could I get a copy, a PDF copy of this document? And they said no. They said, oh, I don't know what document you're talking about. Okay. And so that was back in 2016 or, maybe late 2016, early 2017. What I find interesting is this individual, who again, I won't name, sent me this document right away and said, hey, this might be helpful for you in figuring out what's good and what's bad. And essentially what it says is a knife with a flipper, which they somewhat humorously call a blade spur, a knife with a blade spur, okay, I've got to use my quotes here, and an assist is going to be deemed illegal. All right, that's not cool. It's bad enough, but I want to notice that he does say if it has a thumb stud or a spider hole or something else, even if it's assisted, it's going to be admissible unless it can be opened with centrifugal force. All right. Now, I asked a follow-up question about that. By the way, I will, there's the other, this is where they explain, this is the blade spur they're talking about. And how does he say it? As the knife, okay, hold on. As the knife opens, the protrusion passes through the handle and can therefore be called a device in the handle. If it's combined with a spring mechanism, it may be considered considered prohibited as an automatic knife. Okay, so that's how they're phrasing that. That's how they're considering that. So that's bad enough. But my concern was, okay, what about a knife? Hold on, let me get a knife like this that doesn't have any spring mechanism, but the detent is tuned such that the knife will open if you push the flipper tab. All right. I have sent a follow-up email asking that question and I haven't got an answer yet, but I will point out that this document indicates that it's only the flipper tab and the spring assist that makes this a problem. Okay. I did ask about sending knives for warranty, and essentially he said, yeah, they're going to be reassessed just as if you bought a brand new knife. There's no difference there. But then I said, okay, the problem with the provision 18-01 is that, I have knives that I cannot wrist flick open. All right. But I've had a friend come over who picked up the same knife and was able to flick it open. And here's what he says about that. A normal centrifugal force must be applied. Okay. No, he says, of course, the force applied will be different for each border officers. Anyway, we'll leave him to write how he wants. When I assess a knife for centrifugal force, I will apply a different force and determine if the knife opens most of the time, 5 out of 10 times. If the knife opens only once on 10 tries, I will not classify it as a centrifugal force opening. Okay, so there are a lot of knives here. Let's see if I can demonstrate this on camera without, okay, so I've got a Rat Model 1 and there's no way I'm opening that with centrifugal force. Let's see, here is Cold Steel 4max. I can get it to partially open. If I go off camera here for a second, I can get it to open about to there. Now, of course, the pivot tension is going to make a difference, but I've tried this with a few of my knives and some of them will open, some of them won't. And that's, again, that creates the problem. And again, it does impact how much you have the pivot tighten. So I'm going to talk about that in a second. Finally, I asked about labeling. I also asked if there's a special exception that I could get as a YouTuber. That's a different discussion. So finally, labeling, he said, does not matter. I said, how should the package be labeled? Should it be labeled as a knife, as a folding pocket tool, as a whatever? You know, and I gave him a bunch of different classifications. He said very specifically, the labeling does not matter. Now, recently, I had one of you post on a video saying that, hey, they got in trouble specifically because of the labeling. And so I asked about that, and he says the labeling does not matter. So I don't know, the person who posted that on my video before, I would want to follow that up with CBSA. All right, I would be calling them and asking some questions and asking to speak to a manager, or, you know, take it up the chain as high as you need to, because that sounds really, really questionable. Okay, so whether you label it as a pocket knife or a folding pocket knife or a, you know, camping tool, or, you know, any of the other various designations that we have used and thought of using, that's not going to make a difference. He doesn't talk about disassembling the knives here, and I didn't ask him about that. So I'm not going to worry about it too much. I would think that could be a potential way of doing this. Now, one thing I would say is for warranty work, I would be sending, and in fact, I have sent an email to Kershaw, and I'll follow up with that too. Let's get this stuff out of the way. These are further notes that I want to talk about here, but let's bring some knives back in so that you guys have got something cool to look at. And I'm going to put in knives here that I think, based on my correspondence with CBSA, would cross the border without too much of a problem. Okay. So now I want to follow up by saying a couple of things that we can sort of take out of this discussion. All right. First, there are some knives that I think are going to come across with no problem. Most cold steels are going to come across, CRKs, most Spydercos, you know, a Rat Model 1, I don't think you're going to have any problems with. I think specifically the thing that's going to cause a potential problem is a knife with a flipper tab. All right. And here's the thing. A CBSA agent is probably not going to take this apart to see if there's a spring inside. They may just give it a push and go, yep, that's got some kind of assist inside, even though it doesn't. It's just a really well-made knife. All right, and I've sent a follow-up email about that, and we'll see how he replies. So I think there are lots of knives you can import without having to worry about it too much. Just about anything from Cold Steel, just about anything from Chris Reeves, Spyderco, you know, lots and lots of knives out there. And notice he said specifically, even if it has a spring assist, the fact that it has a thumb stud or spider hole, well, and I don't know of any spring assisted Spydercos like that. Anyway, back to my regular discussion, should be no problem. Okay, so that's good to know. It's still problematic because there are a lot of knives that I've got on my list right now that have a flipper tab that I'm a little dubious about. But it seems that even if it does have a flipper tab, you know, for example, when the only knife I've had inspected recently was a steel wheel resident, and it came through no problem. And I will say, you know, based on what the border guard I was talking with said, that makes sense. All right. Now, I will add one more point here in a second, but pertaining to what doesn't make sense. Where you're going to obviously run into some problems is just about every Kershaw has speed assist. Or has the Kershaw, yeah, speed assist, I guess. And that can be a problem. I think most Kershaws could be, because they're going to have a flipper and assist, that's going to be an issue. There are lots out there that don't have a flipper tab. You know, Kershaw Blur, by his description, shouldn't be a problem. Finally, let me say that I've heard a little bit of inconsistency here. All right, and that is a scary thing. The fact that we can't count on what's happening, you know, you can't know for sure, or at least, I don't know. He sounds very, very confident, but I have heard of some knives that shouldn't break these rules being stopped, maybe. But I'd love to hear your comments down below about that. And finally, the big question remaining is, what about flipper tabs that are not assisted? And I don't know what we're going to find out about that. Hopefully, we'll have an answer on that shortly. The one thing I will say is, yeah, if you have a knife to be sent for warranty, I would say it's a wise choice to, you know, for example, I've got a blade that's messed up. Well, I'm going to take the blade out, send the blade alone to Kershaw, and hopefully they'll be happy with that. I'm going to email them first. Finally, I want to point out that, look, now we've at least got some information straight from an authoritative source indicating that there are some folding knives that are going to be fine, okay? That, you know, every single knife, like every Rat One and Spyderco and any number of knives, they're not just stopping everything and taking everything. It still sounds like most knives are probably getting through. And of course, that's been my experience. All right. I will follow up in a little while with a couple of things. So you're going to want to subscribe, and you're going to want to, you know, kind of come back and check this video every so often, because I'll try to update in the comments. Number one, when I get a subsequent email from CBSA. All right. And number two, when I have everything, I'm waiting for some stuff to come, but I am going to do a giveaway for those people who contribute to the GoFundMe to challenge the knife law as it currently exists. Thanks for watching, and have a great, miserable, right now it's horrible, horrible weather, even though it's, you know, the middle of April. So try to find some warm, comfortable weather, and we'll talk to you soon.